Sacre is a well-known American doctor doing all the right things. He's worked at a major medical center in Boston. He spent 20 years of his earlier career in Liberia, and he was back in Liberia not treating Ebola, but delivering babies. And he was using all the right precautions, and he doesn't know how he got it, but from somebody he came in contact with, he came down with Ebola. Now, Dr. Ali Khan, the CDC guy at the treatment center in charge of treating Sacre, admitted on NBC that, yes, Ebola is coming to America. There's no way it's not going to get on the airplane. There's a 2 to 21 day incubation period. So people will be leaving. They'll have contacted somebody's sweat, somebody's saliva, somebody's sputum, somebody's blood, and they'll feel fine, and they'll get on an airplane, and they'll be in America developing symptoms. Now, they're quite confident that in America, with our high-tech facilities, that we'll be able to isolate those people and squash any Ebola outbreaks in America. Now, I'm confident that when there's 10, they'll do a great job. I'm quite confident that we're not going to have problems from treating the occasional doctor that gets shipped here. I'm confident that when there's 100, they'll probably do a pretty good job. My confidence just goes away when there's 1,000 cases of Ebola in the United States, when it's spreading amongst urban populations. Right now, it's in the slums of Liberia, on Monrovia. There's 1.5 million people, many of them living in horrible, cramped conditions in slums, and it's exploded there, and there's no containing it. And people are traveling amongst borders. One of the reasons that this epidemic got out of hand was that it started in an area that bordered three different countries, Liberia and Monroe. Anyway, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. And so people were traveling between each of these three countries. They're in small settlements, and so it transmitted fairly easily amongst people. It was very hard to keep it isolated in one place. Now that it's in the cities and in the slums, it's absolutely impossible. Basically, the cases are exploding. There's half as many beds in Liberia to treat Ebola as there are cases right now in the major city, Monrovia, the major city that's infected in Liberia. So in the entire country, they have half as many beds as they need just to treat the people in that city. And it's doubling so fast, there's just no way they're going to keep up with it.
In today's world, I just had a horrible thought. All that would have to be done by some ISIS terrorists is contact the disease and then just come home.
Yeah. I could see an
ISIS
terrorist.
That is scary.
Just like a terrorist, like a bomber.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of blowing them up, what they need to do is just simply go and hug somebody who's dying on the streets and lying outside the hospitals in their diarrhea and in their vomit and blood. Just go and pick that person up and then go get on an airplane. That's all they need to do. And then just make sure that they go and hang out in like an inner city area in New York or one of the big cities until they wander around and contact as many people as they can until they die. That's really all somebody would need to do. I mean, imagine what they'd spread versus blowing themselves up in a little square and affecting 50 people or 100 people. Think of what one person could do just getting on an airplane. I mean, it's pretty scary.
It is, and it would be a lot easier for them to get through the airport. There's no metal detection. There's no explosive detection.
And if they do it soon enough, they don't even have a fever. I mean, in parts of the world, they're screening people with infrared screens, so you don't have to touch people and just screening them. And if you've got a fever, you don't get on the plane.
Yeah.
You're staying put. And in Liberia and Monrovia, they said they cordoned off this huge slum, and people were freaking out and trying to get out of there because, imagine you're stuck in the slum, you got no food, you got no, no water, no, horrible conditions. People are lying in their vomit and in their diarrhea, and you just got to get out of there, or you're gonna get it too, and you're gonna die. And if you go to the edge, all the cops say is how much money you got. If you got $10, you're out of there. It's just as simple as that. If you got a few bucks, you can hand the cop a few bucks, and you're the one that gets to cross the line and go somewhere else. And if you're lucky, you went somewhere else and you didn't pick up Ebola before you got out of there. And if you're unlucky, you brought the Ebola with you, and it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Matt, I forget who the guest was, but I had a guest on last year, I believe, and they were telling us about how FEMA and the CDC were working together, and that there were stockpiles of coffins that had been accumulated at different locations throughout the United States, and different installations that were built in different parts of the United States. And I remember this guest saying, I don't know who he was, I'll have to go through the files because you just triggered something, that the CDC and FEMA were preparing for a major epidemic.
Well, they just bought 140,000 protective suits,
Mm-hmm.
with seams, tape sealed seams,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all over the news right now. That they just placed a big order for 140,000 of these isolation suits. But the isolation suits, you go through so fast. I mean, I was reading something talking about the quantity of suits needed. If we were going to fight the numbers of people who were infected in Liberia with Western methods, the numbers of suits that would be put on and thrown away like after one use is outstanding. The numbers of rubber gloves, the numbers of booties, the numbers of masks. I mean, you're just talking a phenomenal amount of gear to fight that. So very, very rapidly, the high level of isolation just goes away, in a situation like that.
Matt, stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Matt Stein is our special guest. www.whentechfails.com or www.mattstein.com. Scary stuff, and this is why I've always said fact is stranger than fiction. Matt Stein and I will return on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send an email, tell me if there's a special guest you'd like on, a special topic. Email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away. Hi, this is Rob McConnell, just letting you know that the X Chronicles newspaper is now available online at www.xzonebookclub.com. All past editions and current editions of the X Chronicles newspaper are available for 99 cents. That's www.xzonebookclub.com, and that's 99 cents US per edition. And don't forget, the X Zone store is now open as well for all of your X Zone Nation merchandise. www.thexzonestore.com.
Do you have a disease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, aguidinglight, spelled LITE.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Welcome back, everyone. Matt Stein is my special guest. We're talking about the Ebola virus, or the Ebola disease. The Ebola, just the name, strikes fear into the heart of men and women alike. Matt, do we know what the origin of the Ebola virus is?
Well, again, people speculate that it was developed in a lab. I personally subscribe to the belief that it's It's a jungle virus that is present in the simian populations in the jungle, and it made the jump to humans, as many viruses in the past have. I mean, when they've analyzed the Spanish flu virus that killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide and at the end of World War I, they believe, looking at DNA in samples that were preserved in wax from people who died, that it was an avian flu that transmuted into a swine flu that transmuted into a human flu. And similarly, I think Ebola, it was a simian virus, a monkey virus, that made the jump from monkeys to people. And, it's very easy to see a virus jumping from monkeys to people. We're so similar, and, not much difference between a monkey and a person genetically wise, just a few chromosomes.
So now that we've got the audience totally scared, how can we best prepare ourselves for the multiple levels of fighting this disease will require?
Well, I think you want to prepare on multiple levels. So you want to prepare. One is that if the virus really makes the jump into America, and it gets to the point where the healthcare system is overloaded, like basically in my mind that's a number like 1,000 cases. If it spreads into major metro areas, and because of its incubation time, it could easily infect hundreds of people before they really jump on it in any major metro area in the country. And so say you got a hold in 3 or 4 metro areas, then in a few weeks, if it gets loose of isolation wards, it could easily be at that number. So then what you're going to see is you're going to see people freaking out. You're going to see people leaving the hospitals, the hospital care workers, because they'll see their coworkers dying. They'll see their coworkers bringing home the virus, infecting their families and killing their families. So, people will start going home. People will avoid shopping centers. People will avoid trains, buses, taxis, any place where commerce is done, schools, all of those places. So what you need to be ready for on multiple levels is, one, how can you have enough gloves, masks, and throwaway clothing on hand, so if you have to handle a family member or somebody you think might have Ebola, that you can do it relatively safely. 2, have alternative meds and herbs on hand that are effective against viruses, extreme viruses. And I've got several of those I can recommend now.
Sure.
Now, I'm going to give you a caveat. I am not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing advice that's been shared with me, and I'm sharing data on it, but I'm not giving you medical advice because I'm not a doctor and I'm not qualified to do that. And so that's number 2, is having these, stocking up on these things. And number 3 is making sure that, this is not Y2K. I was not worried about a few computer bits. I knew that Y2K was something that was going to be solved very easily. There was a lot of money. There was an easy solution. This is something which is going to take a long time to solve. This is something that has the potential to shut down commerce in this country for a year or more, certainly for several months, cause widespread panic. This is something that has the potential to make all major metro areas into death zones.
Wow.
And so, when the Black Death, when the plague went through Europe, basically the people who survived were the people that got out of the populated areas, that went into the country and into the hills. When you stayed in the cities, the transmission factors were just too easy, and it was a death sentence when you stayed in the cities. Now, I'm hoping that the government people are right, that they keep this stuff under control and under wraps and in isolation, that they nail every single little case that shows up in this country when it sneaks into the country and it doesn't get out of hand. But when I see what's happened in Africa, and I see how easily it's transmitted amongst people who are doing the right things and being very careful about body fluids, and basically when people have Ebola, they start vomiting. They start having diarrhea. There's, some cases they bleed out of the eyes and all their orifices.
Wow.
In the nose. And so just touching them, I watched a very frightening film by a New York Times correspondent who was in Liberia filming, and he went through a small village. Now that village, this is part of the good news about it. That village had was where one of the earlier parts of the Ebola epidemic came. They educated the people in the village